In this segment, I'm going to take a look at how you can create a shape and then apply an array either to the outline of the shape or to the fill of that shape. And you'll be able to choose your array from your clipart library or from objects that we create. So I'll show all of those different things. And to get started, I'm just going to choose a simple shape object tool and draw some sort of an object. Now, looking at that object properties, you can see here that in the Fill Stitch tab, I have an option for Array. And also, if I click on the Outline tab, there's an option for Array. Now, I'll go ahead and click on Array for the outline of this shape. And it opens up my clipart library, and it allows me to browse through the different designs in my clipart gallery, and I can select a design, and then I choose Insert. And right away, my mouse turns into a cross. And what I need to do is I need to click and drag like this. And that's how I can set the size and sort of angle of this little butterfly. And so I need to do this until I decide at what size I want it. And when I let go, it then applies that butterfly around my shape. So you can see here that I've created this array outline using the butterfly motif. Now, if I select on that object and then looking here at the object properties for the outline, you can see it's an array. I have some settings. There's always settings for your array objects, and in this case, because it's an outline, I have really just two settings: offset and spacing. Now, offset, if I first of all need to check to turn that on, and then I can apply a number. Right now it's 0. Why don't I give it an offset of 10, just so that we'll be able to see what it does. So I added 10 millimeter offset, and what you can see is it's pushed all of the butterflies to be 10 millimeters outside of the line of this shape. The center of the butterfly, I guess, is moved 10 millimeters from that line. And this different the opposite could be done if I put a negative number, so I'll put negative 10 in there, and you'll see that the butterflies get moved towards the inside of that shape. So that's how the offset tool works. Now, the other option in here is the spacing. So I can control the space between the butterflies, and if I go ahead and add a bigger number here, I'll put like 5 millimeter spacing. It increases the amount of space between the butterflies and therefore decreases the overall number of butterflies that get put around this object. Now, one more thing that you can do with any array is you have the ability to separate these array objects into individual objects. And so if I click on this button here, Separate to Objects, it goes ahead and it recognizes all of the different butterflies that were part of that array, and basically it makes them like they're individual butterflies. And not only that, individual objects can now be selected. So if I needed to modify the colors or the size or the shape of even just one of these butterflies, then I could do that by using that Separate to Objects button. So maybe what I'll do is I'm just going to select everything here and delete and start another object. And so I'll just create another shape. And this time, instead of applying an outline array, I'll choose to apply an array to the fill. So on the Fill tab, I choose the Array button. And same idea, I get the clipart library. And from the clipart library, I can scroll through and choose, a motif that I want to use as the pattern for the inside of this shape. So I'm going to choose this curl and say Insert. And again, I have to click and drag to set the size of the curl to be the size and the angle of the curl for the orientation. So I get to decide sort of how it's going to look. So I'll pick something like this, and when I let go, it starts to fill my shape in with that curl object. Now, just like with the outline array, with a fill array, I have some settings that I get to control. And so the first thing, I guess, that's important to learn is that we actually have a pattern, I guess is what you can call it. So the fill pattern is set at shape fit. I could change that to be rectangular fit. And I think what I'm going to do, I want to see a few more. I'm going to make the motif smaller. So probably the easiest thing to do might be to say undo and then apply the array again so that I'll choose that same curl, but I'll make it smaller this time. I'd just like to see a few more of them for the demonstration. So rather than dragging it to be so big, I'll just make it a little bit smaller so that we get more curls filling in the shape. So, like I was showing you in here, we have the type of pattern fill, and this is set for shape fit. And we have other options like rectangular fit, and we have circular fit, and we have contour, and we have single line, which isn't normally a choice that we would choose for a large shape like this, as you can see. Shape fit, and then we have line fit. So each one of these different choices of fill pattern give different types of settings that you can control. So I'm going to go back to the rectangular fill and just show a little bit about what these numbers mean. So I guess the first thing I'll show is this one at the bottom here. It says, it's a checkbox. It says trim shapes. And if I click on that checkbox to uncheck it, you'll see that it basically will not trim the shape. It'll give you the complete shape, or it'll leave a little bit of space. So you don't get any objects being trimmed, but you don't get a perfect fit to your shape either. So if I check that back on again, trim shapes, then you'll see that you can have like partial ones in here and parts missing over there. So that's basically what it does. Now, this checkbox here for offset, just like with the outline, if I choose offset, and maybe we'll give this a -5 millimeters, it will move the distance of the shape fit, or the rectangle in this case, to be 5 millimeters to the inside of my overall shape. So now we have the horizontal spacing and the vertical spacing, and right now they're set at 0. And if I type in a number, so if I make my horizontal spacing 2 millimeters, then you see a little bit of space horizontally. If I change my vertical spacing to, let's say, 4 millimeters, then you'll see 4 millimeter vertical spacing. You also have the ability to choose the slant angle, which is at 0, and if I change that to, let's say, 25, then it'll put my embroidery on a 25-degree angle. And then the slant angle, that's set at 90, and if I change that to, let's say, be 45, you'll see that it actually changes the slant of this line, which basically ends up overlapping. I'm going to show you this. I'm going to start my start angle at 0, and I'll start my slant angle at 90. And you can see here that I end up with a very 90-degree rectangle, and so my rectangle fill creates rows and columns and rows. Now, if I change the vertical angle, the slant angle, the slant angle is the baseline. What angle is that on? The slant angle is the angle of this green angle, and if I make that, let's say, smaller, so 45, then what it does is it offsets the rows and kind of overlaps the different rows of your little shape. Now, all of this I'm doing quite mathematically, and so you can be very precise, but at the same time, if I want to be more visual, you can use this green angle to make this same adjustment. And the way you do that, right now I've got the object selected using the transform selection. And if I choose the edit shape node selection, now you can see that some small handles have appeared on this green angle line. And so, for example, if I want to, I can change the slant angle. And another thing I could do is change the spacing. So, for example, if I drag this line this way, I get more vertical spacing. If I drag this line this way, I get more horizontal spacing. And if I click and drag this angle, I can put it on any different slant angle. So you can see I have that ability to control the way that my motif is going to appear much more visually than I do using the numbers mathematically. And so that's the rectangle fit. Now if I change this, so notice right now that I've made changes to all of these settings. If I go and change the circular, it tries to maintain those settings, so I still have a similar sort of vertical or horizontal spacing. So if I start a new object, I'll always go back to the default settings for these. But if I create a rectangle fill and change the settings and then apply a circular fill or a contour fill, then some of those different settings may be adjusted. And of course you can still come in and change them to all be, we'll turn the offset off or change the spacing back to 0. So you can do these types of changes. But I thought I would point out that because I changed it on the rectangle and then switched to circular, that it tried to maintain those settings. Now, so with a circle, you have an offset option. You've got a trim shapes option. You have your horizontal spacing, so that's the distance along the horizon of this line. Then you have the start angle. So basically that's where this is. If I move it to 0, that would be the start angle. And then the number of steps. So right now it's set at 6 different kind of rows radiating out from the center. If I make that be a higher number, it'll pack in more rows. If I make that be a lower number, then it'll put in less numbers of rows. So you can see that's 4, and now I've changed it to 5, now 6. So those are the types of ways that you can control a circular array. And again, I can change those with the edit shape nodes. I can also do this type of adjustment visually using the different angle lines. Okay, so now let's try a contour array. And now with a contour array, it's going to follow around the shape and then moving by the vertical and horizontal spacing. So I have quite a large vertical spacing here, so I only really have one row. If I turn that vertical spacing back down to, let's say, 0, I'll get multiple rows in my of contours. And so you can see that, and also the horizontal spacing is quite large. If I turn that back to 0, I'll just get more repeats along my rows. So that's contour fit. Now with contour fill, I also have the option of telling it to follow the angle. And if I turn this off right now it makes my rows and it keeps my motif facing the same direction all the way across the shape. When I have follow angle turned on, it gets the object to turn itself to follow and face each side of the shape. So that's another type of setting that you have for contour array fill. And moving along, well, we have the single line, and like I'd said before, we can control the horizontal spacing of our line, but really I think this is something that has, for smaller types of shapes, this would make more sense, and maybe for some lettering. So we'll demonstrate that later in this segment. The shape fit. Now with the shape fit, very much like the rectangular fit, except for it gets the objects to create the sort of, to emulate the shape. So it doesn't just create rows and columns, it tries to match up with the shape, and it gets all of the rows to kind of have the same look, I guess. And again, you can control the offset and whether the shapes are trimmed or not, the horizontal spacing, the vertical spacing, and the start angle. So again, you can also change those things visually. Now, because it's shape fit, I don't get the ability to change this angle, so it's going to stay at a 90-degree angle, but I do get to choose what the starting angle is if I want my columns to be found on some sort of a pattern. And of course the horizontal and the vertical spacing can be controlled using this green and as well. So that's shape fit, and then there was one more, it was line fit. Now with line fit, you can see here the way that the columns are sort of radiating in lines out from the center, trying to emulate the shape. And again, the different shapes of your objects are going to give you different appearances using these different styles of array fills. So in this case, I basically control the offset or the horizontal spacing. So it's right now a negative 1.6. If I want, I could make it a positive number, so we'll make it 2, and it'll just add space in between, and therefore give me less numbers of shapes in my array fill. So that's array fill using the clip art, and I've just kind of went through all the different styles of array fills and showed how to use all of the settings to control them. Now, why don't we take a look at creating an object that isn't using the array that comes from our fill patterns itself. And so maybe what I'll do is just clean up this, choose to delete this object. And this time I'm going to create, first of all, I'll just create a shape. Now, what shape would you like to either outline or fill this shape with? So what I'll do is I'll just create another object. Maybe we could choose like a little pie shape. Now let's create a small little pie shape. And I'm going to get closer to that pie shape. It's set as a satin fill. I'm going to come to its outline and choose none. So it's a single color outline. Now it could be a multicolor outline. There was no reason why I chose that other than just for appearances. Now, so I have this little shape that I've created, and what I need to do is I need to select everything. So I can say edit and select all, and then when I have this little shape and this big shape selected, if I right click, I get my secondary menu, and in the secondary menu there's an option for array, and it says create outline from shapes or create fill from shapes. So if I choose, for example, create fill from shapes, it's going to take this little pie shape and apply that to the shape that I created. And so we get our different style of array. Now, if I choose the fill tab, I can see that it's an array and it's set for shape fit, and I could change that to be rectangle fill or circular fill or whatever style of fill that you want to, and I have all the same abilities to modify that array with my green angle lines or with the horizontal and vertical spacing. So that's all the same. The main difference is instead of using clip art, I'm able to use an object or an embroidery design that I created to create my array fill. So why don't I try another one? This time I'll just select all these things and delete them, and what I'm going to do is just create a simple sort of design, I guess. So I'm going to create an object, and I'm going to then choose, just similarly, the array tool, which is different from array fill. I'm going to actually use the circular array tool to create a circular array that turns into, you know, kind of like a little bit of a wreath. Okay, so I just created a simple wreath pattern, and I'm just going to select all of those objects and move them up and out of the way a little bit here. Put them over here. Now we'll go ahead and create ourselves another shape. So I'll choose whatever rectangle fill this time. And I'm going to choose, so Control A for select all, and I'm going to say array and say create outline from shapes. And again, I'm given my outline around this shape. Now, I don't get the ability to set the size like I did with the clip art, so my ability to set the size comes from the size of the original. In other words, I'm just going to choose undo. If I wanted to have more of this wreath around this shape, I'm going to say undo. What I need to do is have the original size, the original wreath, be the smaller size that I was after. So, for example, I'm just going to click to let go of this. I'll select my wreath, and I'll just make it smaller. Then I'll choose to add this shape and do the array, create outline from shapes. And you'll see that I have more of those array shapes added to this to the outline because they were smaller there. So that's how you can create an array outline, or you can create an array fill using either objects that you created. And remember, that's by basically you have to select everything and then right click to get the array secondary menu, or by just simply creating a shape and then taking your shape and applying an array either outline or an array fill to that shape. There you have it. So it's very easy to use, and you can be very creative with the array tool. Now, I didn't really find a good example of using the line fit. So I had said text might be a good example of that. So why don't we just go ahead and I'll just hide my embroidery hoop and move outside of the area. Sorry, I want to turn off the embroidery hoop to give myself some more space. And I'm going to put some text, so I'll just put it down here, and we'll put in here artistic. And so that lettering that I've created, now it's maybe not real big for doing an array, so why don't we make it bigger. And let's say you wanted to fill this in with a small star shape. So quite a small star I made. We'll take our star and make it be a 5-pointed star. What didn't I say? Number of rays? 6, 5. There we are. So here we have a small 5-pointed star. I'm going to make sure that it has no outline and it's a satin fill. And then I'm going to select this word. And again, right click and choose Array, Create Outline from Shapes. Actually, sorry, Create Fill from Shapes. And the option I wanted to use was Single Line. And so you can see here that that maybe is a little bit better option because it fills the lines in. Again, my motive, the little star is a little bit small. If I made my word artistic just a little bit larger, then it might turn out a little bit better in some of the areas. Let's see here, because I'm getting a little bit more stars in some of the shapes. And as you can see here, we always have the ability to separate these to objects if you wanted to move the specific placement of just one of the stars to be perfect or whatever. But you can see that's an example of using the line fill as opposed to the sort of rectangle fill or the contour fill, where it's going to just try and fill that whole shape in with the little stars. So just different ways to fill them in. So that's my segment on using the array tool, and hopefully I showed all of the different nuances and ways that you can create array fill and array outline.